My name is Amaya Webster, and I'm the Project Program and Communities Manager at Benetech, as well as your Mathshare liaison. Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I didn't have my camera on. So hi, I'm Lisa Watersvern. I am the Director of Educational Research and Development for Mathshare, as well as other products like ImageShare. And we hope that you enjoy our presentation today of using Mathshare with Google Classroom.
Thank you. All right, before I jump in, just one housekeeping item that I would like to go over. And that is that I know I'll be giving you guys a lot of information during this workshop. And so I'd like to encourage you to ask questions. You can do this using the Q&A function. Lisa will be doing her best to answer questions as we go. There's also a couple of places where I'll stop and give people a chance to ask questions. And then at the end, we'll also have dedicated time for questions. So that is it. And without further ado, let's jump in. So for those of you who are familiar with Mathshare, this screen, if you can see the screen, should look familiar to you. It is the Mathshare homepage. And today I'll be walking you through how to use Mathshare with your students using that Google Classroom integration. The first thing that you'll need to do when you're at the Mathshare homepage is sign in. I think most of you have accounts, but if you don't, the only way to use Google Classroom with Mathshare is to sign up for an account. But we will go ahead and just log in so you can see how that looks. Once you've hit that login or selected that login button, you're going to have the option to either log in with Google or log in with Microsoft. It doesn't matter which one you choose, the interface will look and behave the same. I obviously will log into Google since that's what we're going over today. Go ahead and do that. And so logging in, once you've done that, will bring you to the Mathshare desktop. On this desktop, you'll have any recent sets you've created or opened, as well as pre-made sets that are in the Mathshare database already. It's also where you're going to go ahead and create problem sets. So let's walk through that now. The first thing that you'll do in creating a problem set is click on or select that Create Problem Set button. Doing that is going to pop up this menu. If you can see the screen, it might look a little scary. It's not, and we'll go through it, so don't worry. But basically, what you're doing here is choosing which palettes, for lack of a better term, will be available to your students when you create your problems. You've got the Edit palette, and the Edit palette allows students to do cross-out, calculate simple equations, things like that. Next is the Operators palette that has the standard mathematical symbols. Then we have the Notations palette, so exponents, fractions, square roots, etc. And then the Geometry palette, which is just basic geometry figures that your students can use. If there are palettes that you don't want your students to have access to, you can go ahead and uncheck the box next to that palette, and then it just won't show up for them or for you when you're creating the set. For this demonstration, I'm just going with the default of having them all checked, and now I'm going to next, and I'll actually go into the problem set and the creation of that. Once you're here, and this I would call the problem set dashboard, is where you can, well, obviously create the set, but first you'll probably want to name it. You do that by selecting the edit icon. And then the next thing to do is decide which problem set controls you want to have access to, or that your students will have access to. So on here, you can require that they have to provide explanations, and you can require that they include their work when submitting. And we'll get into what that means a little bit down the line. Once you've decided if you want these on or off and you've toggled them the way you want, you'll go ahead and go to the Add a New Problem button, which opens, if you can see the screen, the area where you'll in fact create that problem. And for those of you who are looking at the screen, you'll notice that the palettes we were talking about at the beginning now show up here. So the first thing that you'll be doing is entering in your equation in the equation field. and then entering in instructions for the equation and what you want your students to do in the prompt field. You can enter in the prompt field either by typing, or you can use the microphone icon and dictate it and it'll transcribe for you. I've created an example of what this would look like. We have the equation 5x plus 3 equals 28, and the prompt is simple. It's just solve for x. I'll add this problem, and then I have two options. If I want to add additional problems to the set, I'll select, if I want to add additional problems to the set, I'll add in a new equation, put in the instructions, and then hit add problem. Or I can hit done, and that'll take me back to this dashboard, which is what I'm going to do. And if you're looking at the screen, you'll see that the problem I've created now shows up on that problem set dashboard. And now that it shows up, I can assign it to my students. And let's get into that. The first thing that you'll do when assigning to a student is select the 3-dot menu. This is actually what pulls up your two options of duplicate or share the problem set. The duplicate just creates another problem if you want to edit it. You can also edit it by going into the problem itself. That is probably a topic for another webinar. What we will be choosing is that share problem set. And that opens up the share problem set window. From here, there's 3 ways that you can go about sharing. You can copy the link and then email it to a student, text it, whatever. You can select the Google Classrooms feature, which is that Google Classrooms integration, or the Microsoft Teams. For us, we're going to go to Google Classrooms, since that's what we're exploring today. Once you've done that, you'll choose the class that you're assigning it to and the action that you're doing, which is in this case, assigning. So I've chosen my class, I've chosen my create assignment, I'm going to hit go, and that opens up the actual Google Classroom. This is where I can edit the title of the problem, I can determine how many points the problem is worth, etc. There's one really important thing on this page, and that is the due date. In order to work with Mathshare, you have to assign a due date. If you don't assign a due date, your students will get a message when they try to submit their work that they need to pick a class with assignments. Other than that, you're good to go. You can select assign, and now you've got it assigned. It shows you the students that it's been assigned to. Got 2 assigned, 0 turned in. I think I might have gone through that pretty fast. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing for a second just to see if there are any questions.
And there's no questions in the Q&A or the chat box, but if you would like, this is probably a good time.
Okay, well, if there are no questions at this point, I'm going to continue on. Oh, looks like we are getting a question. So the question, I don't know if people can see it or not, is if you can assign to individual students within a class. Yes, you can do that. I have a class that I created with one whole student, so I can't really demo that for you. But the way that Google Classroom works is, you can either assign to the whole class or you can assign to specific people. Thank you. Good question. And somebody else asking, will it show up in Nemeth for students who use Braille? That is a really good question. I might have to get back to you on that. Unless Lisa, do you know if it will show up with Nemeth?
I don't actually. So why don't, if there's a question that we can't answer for you today, we're happy to follow up. You can email us at mathshare.benetech.org or mathshare@benetech.org. Sorry, mathshare@benetech.org.
And now I'm seeing, will it work in Canvas LMS? So we're currently working with a hoping to get a direct integration. But what we do have now is when you go to that sharing portal, and you saw that there was the Google Classrooms and Microsoft Teams, there's also a place where you can copy the link, and you can take that link and then put it into Canvas, and that way it'll work with Canvas as well.
Yeah, and that's true for all the different LMS systems. If you copy the link and share it within your your LMS, it will then send it over to your student to open it up.
Yes. And I see in the chat that we're being asked if we can show it from the student's perspective. That is absolutely what I will do next. Just wanted to take a second to see if there was any questions before I went on. And it looks like there aren't, so I will continue on. But again, feel free to continue popping those questions in the Q&A as we go. All right, so that was for the teacher. For the student will log into their Google Classrooms account and they'll see the assignment that you've given them. They'll go ahead and click on that assignment to open it up in Google Classrooms. And then they'll click on it again to open up the problem itself in Mathshare. At this point, if they're not already signed in, and I'm automatically signed in, they will need to sign in. That's the only way that the sharing with Google Classrooms works. Once they get to the problem set that you've assigned, they'll go ahead and they'll click on the problem to open it. And then they're presented with the equation, the instructions, and we'll go ahead and just work on it. I've actually already gone through and worked on it so that we can see what it looks like. But if people have any questions about how a student would work through it, we did have a previous webinar on what that would be like, and I can share out a link to the YouTube channel in case people are interested in seeing that. So what we have here is just the example of what it would look like. So me being the student, I went in, I solved it, I'm all done, and now I'm going to select the finish button to get back to that problem set page in my account. From here, I'm ready to share it. And the way that I will share it with the teacher is I will click on the Share My Answer button and then choose either the Google Classrooms, Microsoft Teams, or copying that link. And for anybody who can see the screen, this looks exactly the same as it did for the teacher. And this is where what I was saying that like if you wanted to use it with Canvas or a different LMS, this is where you would copy the link from and then just put that link into the LMS that you're using. But for us, we're using Google Classrooms. So we'll select that Google Classrooms. And just like the teacher, as a student, I will choose the class that it's submitting for and the assignment, and I'll select go. And now I'm being asked to attach my work. That was one of the toggles that I had toggled on at the beginning. So I will go ahead and attach it. And then I'll go view the assignment in Google Share itself. And that step's important because this is how they'll turn it in. And I think this is true for all Google Share and Google Classroom, regardless of how you're using it. But once it's here, the student will click on that turn in button or select that turn in button. And this is now the teacher view, if you can see the screen, but it shows that I now have one assigned and one turned in. As a teacher, I can then see the work that was done by clicking on the assignment that was turned in, and it will take me directly back to Mathshare. If I click on the problem, I now see what they've done and the answer that they've gotten to. And I can now go back to Google Classrooms, I can comment on it, I can grade it, etc. So it's pretty straightforward. I know there is a learning curve, but once you've gotten past that hump, it really leads you right through it. Again, I presented a lot of information at everyone, so I'd like to open it up for questions at this point. If there's anything you would like clarification on, more information about, or just general questions that you might have.
So May, it looks like there's a number of questions about the student's use case. And one from Shava, can I have a student open a blank template and use their Scratchpad, or would they need to create? And so generally the way that Mathshare works is students will be solving a problem. They can create their own problems and solve them, which might go well with the question we have about, I saw another, if a teacher makes an assignment not in Mathshare, can the student use Mathshare to solve the equations so they can do it digitally and share it back to the classroom? And still the same things, yes. So the student would actually enter the equation and then solve that equation and be able to share it with the teacher.
Thank you, Lisa, and well explained.
The next one I think is the question about, do students need to log into Mathshare? So May, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so students don't need to log into Mathshare, but I cannot recommend it enough. Logging into Mathshare allows the student and the teacher to actually use the Google Classroom's integration feature. If you're not logged in, the only way that work can be shared is through the copying that link. And then they would either have to email it or go into a different LMS and paste it in that way. They also won't have that desktop that I had shown. They'll just have like the problem and then a note that they're not signed in. And if they need to share it, they have to copy the link. Let's see. We'll share out once this this webinar is also being recorded. So once the captioning is done and we have the recording, I'll send it out to everybody along with the link to the YouTube channel.
So Mary had a question about, will Mathshare read the problem? And so you didn't just go through that, did you? I was answering another question. But the text-to-speech capability that has been built into Mathshare allows the student to click on the microphone button that will read out the equation and the instructions that the teacher has put in for them to solve. So it's a really great option for students who might struggle with reading the equation on their own or rely on their teacher or their parent to do it. This gives them the option to do it independently. And there's a few questions about leveling, Amaya. Do you want me to handle those or do you want to do that?
Sure, you can. I'm still going through them all.
That's okay. So Mathshare was developed and sort of optimized for algebra because we talked to a number of teachers who said that's really where their students are breaking down, where they have a lot of trouble. As we've been talking to more school districts and as we've been talking to more individuals, what we're finding is that Mathshare, it has a big usage for the younger grades as well. So for the anonymous attendee who asked about primary students, you can put in equations as simple as 2 + 2, right? And so the student can solve those. They don't have to be complex algebraic equations. Now, on the other side, there was a question about, what's the highest level of math we would say Mathshare is appropriate for. As you saw in the problem creation set that Amaya showed you when she was showing how to make a problem, you'll see that there are palettes for notations and basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, also geometry. And so depending on the buttons that you are requiring would really be your only limit. We are looking at expanding to other not only in math, but also in chemistry, other types of or more advanced math. But as of right now, I would say that the geometric functions that we've put in and the algebraic ones are probably going to be the best bet to start. And then we can always, let you know about when we've expanded it back to trig and calculus.
It seems like there is definitely interest in seeing what it would look like to actually work through a problem. Since we have a little bit of time, I can just go through one problem, if that would be helpful for people.
Sure, and there's also real quick, Amanda, before you go in, there's a question about taking problems from iReady PDF and adding them to Mathshare.
I'm not familiar with iReady, but I mean, as long as I'm not familiar with iReady. Are you familiar with it, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with iReady, but the way Mathshare is set up right now is we don't have the capability built in to actually read a PDF and get that into Mathshare. That is something that is on our longer term roadmap that we are hoping to build out so that you could take a picture of a PDF or screenshot of a PDF. But right now the equations need to manually be added at this point.
Thank you. And I apologize for the delay. I'm just logging into my account.
And I don't know, did we answer the question about Seesaw?
I believe so, but we can reiterate that Mathshare should work with any LMS. You'll just take that copy link, and I can show that again, and then enter it into the Seesaw application.
So I think the only outstanding one that I can see is sharing a video of the student working through the problem, but I think that's what you were going to do right now, right, Amaya?
Yeah, I'll work through it. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen again. So if you can see the screen, what you're looking at is my Mathshare student account. And I have the new problem set right here. This is, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't actually what I thought, but let's go ahead and just create it. So I'm a big fan of that 5x plus 3 equals 28. And solving for x. I'm going to add the problem, and I am done. So if I were a student, I could go into this. The equation's now there. My instructions are here, and I'll just simply start working on it. I use my keypad. Apparently I'm solving for z and not x. I use my keypad, but again, we can use the palettes as well. So I would say, the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 3 from both sides. Over here, you'll say I'm subtracting 3 from both sides to start isolating z. Because it's me and I want to go through this a little bit quickly, I can use this cross out to already start cleaning it up. I can use calculate to get to that 25. That's the example of using, the calculate on really simple equations. And then I will add my step. And so all the work that I've done has appeared. It's showing my thinking behind it, and it cleans it up for me so that there's less clutter, which is good for like cognitive load and reducing cognitive load.
Hey, Amaya, while
Yeah.
you're doing that, do you mind hitting the microphone button to demonstrate how it reads the equation for the
Not
step you just did?
Oh, that's a really good idea. Should I go back to this step?
You can go to either step 1 or step 2 just to demonstrate it.
Sure. This also shows how you can edit things. So I clicked on the pencil icon in order to edit it. And to hear it read out loud, I will click on this audio button.
Audio is not set up on the Zoom for share.
Oh, too bad. Let me see if I can set that up. Oh, you know why? Because I'm on my headphones.
Okay. Yeah. So, Linda, sorry about that. But what you would do is you can see there's a number of microphones or a number of speakers. There's one in the instructions, the solve for x, 5x plus 3 equals 28. You can hit it there. Also, after step 1, it can read that. After step 2, the work you've done, it can read that. All of the steps will have a text-to-speech capability that will be built in.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm sorry about that. I am doing the work from home with another person who's working from home and is also in a meeting. So we're both on our headphones.
And Jennifer, you ask if they can dictate their work. They can dictate their rationale or their reasoning for how they are actually solving the equation, but we are not able to have them, because of the current technology that's available, say 5x plus 25 and have it pick that up. That is something we're working not only with our organization, but other organizations who specialize in assistive technology for math to try to figure out how do we build that in and how do we make it reliable. But one of the things that the student is asked to do is to explain why they made the choice they did. So I'd want to know why Amaya subtracted 3 from both sides of the equation. And that's where you can dictate that information in.
And so I would press this microphone and say, I've divided 5 from both sides to isolate x. And then it will just populate in what I've said.
Another really good question that just came through, Amaya, is, are there any keyboard navigation for it to function without the use of a mouse? And absolutely. In our accessibility section on the website, it has a number of keyboard navigations or keyboard combinations that you can use to navigate through with the keyboard alone without using a mouse. Yeah,
and actually I realized that people on this webinar can't actually see what I'm doing, but I use tab to navigate through a lot. So yes, it is absolutely possible. Yeah, so I mean, and that's how they work through it. They work through it by steps. They can use these palettes, they can use their keyboard. There's all these different ways of entering in that information because we really want it to be accommodating of all different learning types.
We also had a question about addressing the touchscreen fluency using a laptop. So we are in the process very near to actually pushing it out to the public to view mobile capabilities. And so as part of mobile capabilities, increasing the usage of Mathshare on a phone and or a tablet. That work on the tablet will actually increase that fluency using the laptop. So a touchscreen laptop. A lot of the skills are pretty similar between the two. So we are actively working on that, and it's in the very, very near-term future.
And one thing that I think everybody on this call knows, but just in case, I'll reiterate that Mathshare is free for students and teachers and can be used standalone, but really is designed to work with LMSs to sort of amplify those benefits.
So Maya, can you, because we did have a question about increasing the size of icons, can you show what things can be changed in the personalization settings?
Sure, let me reshare my screen.
And while you share your screen, Angela, real quick to your question, are there illustrations such as sticks or balls used for primary students? Not at this time. Not at this time, but if that's something that you feel like would really benefit your students, we can definitely pass that on to the product team. As I mentioned, you know, it was optimized for sort of middle school, high school, but the more we talk to educators, the more we realize that it really has use cases for younger kids as well. I happen to have 3 kids, 5th grade and below, and I know exactly what you mean about some of those illustrations. We use them quite a bit with my 1st grader. So, you know, that again, that if there is enough of a need for it is something we can definitely look into.
And this is not quite the same thing, but it just reminded me of it. You know, we're always happy to do like a little private walkthrough or demonstration if you feel like that would be helpful. So if you email us and say, hey, I'd love to set up a time to do a workshop. Lisa's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, so we can almost always accommodate time zones and enjoy doing that. So, you know, feel free to reach out. And as for the personalization settings, this is another feature of being logged in, and another reason why I would always encourage people to log in when they're using Mathshare. With the personalization settings, I can choose which font I want it to have, including the Open Dyslexic. I can choose, I'm going to take that off though. So that was the font. I can choose the line height, letter spacing, text to speech speed, any of those things. In terms of like icon size, that's actually something that is controlled by the browser itself. You can absolutely do that, but you would go into the browser preferences.
And so Amaya, one question we had is, how do I add my students in Mathshare?
Sure. So to add students in Mathshare, like, do you mean into a Google Classroom, or did you mean directly to Mathshare? I realize now that you can't talk back to me, so I'll just answer both. So when you're adding students in Google Classroom, and I will admit to not being a Google Classroom pro, but the way that I did it was I went to my Google Classroom account and then clicked on the People button and had the option to either copy a class code or invite people via email. And then I'd either click on the invite via email and send them an email, or I could send just that code via email. And once they open that email or use the code, then they were able to join my class. For Mathshare, you're not actually joining like a Mathshare account. What they would do is just like, you could provide the Mathshare link to your student, and then they will go in and create an account. And then from there, you know, there's that share my work button that will open that interface with Google Classrooms.
And so to the question, Sandra, about, can you point us to the best and most recent overview recorded webinars that would precede this recording? We have a YouTube channel, and I don't know if you mind putting into the chat box the YouTube channel.
Let me grab it.
And also, as Amaya offered, we're willing to also, do bigger presentations to districts or schools. We've done a number of them to different statewide organizations as well. So sometimes people have very specific questions and we can address those live. So that's another option as well. And okay, so is there a way to share teacher lessons that is sharing between teachers? I actually don't know the answer to that. That's a really great question. One of the things that I do know, though, is we are looking to build up our problem bank. And so we have a problem bank library. And so we're working on trying to figure out how do we build that up. And as we do, those problem sets could be shared between teachers as well. Now, if it's a private set, that might be something we need to do a little bit more work on. But I don't know if you want to take that one over.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was absolutely correct. We're working on building up that sharing bank, that library bank. As you saw at the very beginning, there was a set of like pre-made questions that just live in Mathshare. So as we build those out and we get that sharing function established, then you'll have those problems that you can pull from that other teachers have worked on or that you've worked on and want to share yourself.
And I do see that you put the YouTube channel in there. Thank you. I noticed that there were a few questions that came in through chat also. I want to make sure we don't miss any of those. Okay, so hoping for the PDF reader. Thank you, Stacy. That is definitely something we have been funded to look into. So it's something that is very well on our roadmap for sure. And I'd be interested to hear your feedback on what on what you find with Google Read Write versus Kami, because I know that we've had a lot of teachers ask us what the best way to use Mathshare would be, and they're evaluating things similarly as well. Any other questions or any other thoughts? Are we looking at working with Equatio? Yeah, we've talked to Equatio before. It's worth talking to them again. I think for certain, we think it's a really great product, and we think that it serves students with disabilities very, very well. We are definitely open to it. So, that is something that I'll continue trying to work on. And one other thing that I may have said, but I think it's worth repeating, we love your feedback. So as you're using Mathshare, if you have an idea of something that would make it better, or if you're like, hey, this isn't working quite like I'd like it to, we want to hear from you. And so that address again is mathshare@benetech.org. We are a .org. And would love to hear your feedback. Amaya is also currently looking for user testers too. So if you are the kind of person that you're like, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to bring you on as kind of a user tester. You can see some advanced features and functions, as well as, even play with some of the things that aren't necessarily well formed yet, right? Just to kind of figure out what people are using and what students really ultimately need to succeed.
Thank you, Lisa. You just did my plug for me. And so smoothly. It was great. But yes, we are always looking for user testers. And I love user testing, and I love using actual real live users in our user testing, because then we find out not only the feedback that's most needed, but also I feel like it gives you the opportunity to sort of help shape the project to your specific needs, which is a kind of cool thing. Any last questions? Yes. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Stacy. I'll be sending out an email. I guess it is already later this week, so probably early next week, asking for volunteers to do user testing. So please feel free to pass that along to this teacher or put us into contact. I'd love reaching out and discussing things and doing user testing, as I said. Any last questions before we wrap up?
Well, thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate you. Oh, we have one more question. Is the project free only for a limited time? That our plan is to continue to make it free. We have a variety of different funding sources that we rely on that are allowing us to make it free. So we hope that it will always be free. But we do realize the importance of having free tools available for students and teachers.
All right. Well, with that, thank you both. You're very, very welcome. And thank you everybody for joining. I again will say, feel free to reach out via email with questions, or if you want to schedule some additional time that we can just go over how Mathshare works and ways that you can use it. Again, we're happy to do that, and we will be in touch. And I'll also be sending out the recording of this once it's ready. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.